Thank you everyone for joining us today and to the festival for bringing us all together. I'm Nicolette Scott. I'm a strategic partner manager at YouTube. I have the privilege of working with independent journalists and digital content creators. YouTube is committed to helping independent journalists, publishers, and broadcasters thrive on the platform. And it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our panelists for today's discussion. Starting with our moderator for the discussion, Johnny Harris. Harris is an Emmy Award-winning independent journalist and contributor to the New York Times. Based in Washington, D.C., he reports on interesting trends and stories domestically and around the globe, publishing to his audience of over 3.5 million people on YouTube. Harris produced and hosted the twice Emmy-nominated series Borders for Vox Media. His visual style blends motion graphics with cinematic videography to create content that explains complex issues in relatable ways. Alejandro Páez Varela is a Mexican journalist, writer, and co-author of more than a dozen political works, including La Disputa por México, just published in 2022. He was deputy director of the newspaper El Universal and founder of the magazine Día 7 that was published for 11 years. He also worked as an editor at the newspapers Reforma and El Economista. He currently serves as general director of digital first newsroom Sin Embargo. Cleo Abram is an independent video journalist. She leads, hosts, and writes Huge If True, an optimistic show about technology. With an audience of over 2 million people and 40 million views, Huge If True is an antidote to the doom and gloom, helping its wide audience decode the world around them and see positive futures they can help build. Before going independent, Cleo was a video producer for Vox, and she wrote and produced for Vox's Netflix show Explained, was sole host of Vox's first ever daily show Answered, and was co-host of Vox's YouTube original show Glad You Asked. And last but not least, Jack Kelly is the founder and CEO of TLDR News, a group of YouTube channels creating informative and impartial news content for young people. TLDR videos are designed to help even the most casual news viewer stay on top of events around the world, breaking down and explaining stories in an approachable and apolitical manner. Today, TLDR remains an entirely independent and self-funded organization which reaches tens of millions of young people a week with over 2 million subscribers across the network. To make that happen, TLDR employs a team of 10 young people in London who help to create around 20 unique videos every week. And with that, I will turn it over to Johnny Harris, who will lead our discussion.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So today's conversation I've already been having this conversation, and it's fascinating as an independent journalist myself. Talking to these other creators is so enlightening, and that's my hope, is that we can sort of have a conversation about what it means to be on the front lines of doing journalism a little bit differently than it's normally done, and some of the challenges of that, but also some of the unique opportunities. I think the first thing I want to do is let everyone talk about what their operation is, what it actually does, who it reaches, and how they make money. So I'll go first. I make 4 videos a month, so we're publishing with a team of about 10 full-time employees. We make money mainly because of revenue from ads that play on our YouTube, like pre-roll, as well as sponsorships. And we have about 20 million views a month, so the audience sort of is around there. Cleo, why don't you give us an overview of your channel?
Yeah, Huge If True is a show that is on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram primarily. I publish one long form, meaning 15 to 25 minute episode a month on YouTube, and then lots of shorter videos on all of those platforms, probably maybe 3 or 4 times a week. I work with a team of 2 roughly full-time people and a set of other expert folks that come in to do 3D animation one day or something like that. And we make money because we sell sponsorships into the long-form YouTube videos and also as individual short-form videos. The advertiser gets a sort of slot that's clearly marked as an ad within that long-form YouTube video.
Go ahead, Jack.
Hey, I think my intro covered a fair bit of this already, but as has already been said, I run TLDR News. We post about 15 videos a week. Those are kind of 8 to 12 minute explainer videos that run through kind of politics and news topics from the UK and around the world. We currently do that with 10 employees based out of London, and our revenue primarily comes from sponsorships within videos, as has already been said, and obviously the AdSense provided by YouTube as well.
Awesome. Alejandro.
Thanks. I would like to thanks first to the organizers because the panel is called New and Young Journalists, and that's, of course, my case. Now, I'm a very traditional journalist that we did. I came from the printed press, then we jumped to websites, and suddenly 3 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic, we jumped to video, and everything changed, and we're going to talk about that. We do a lot of videos. We have a major success in Mexico doing news shows, and well, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a big question maybe I hear a lot here at a conference like this is like, why do this independent? What is the upside of, journalistically, but also from a business perspective, of deciding to jump ship from an institution and do this on our own, and specifically to do it on a platform like YouTube, which up until recently has not really been taken seriously by a lot of the kind of powers that be, that people see like YouTube is like what the kids are doing these days. And yet what all of us do is like we run businesses, we employ people, we do journalism, we do reporting. Alejandro has a really interesting background. I would love to hear sort of his take on this as someone who comes from decades of being a print reporter and then making the jump into video on YouTube, a very different platform. Why, Alejandro? What is the purpose and what have you seen as the benefit of doing that?
Well, your first question was about why being an independent journalist, and I believe in my case, I have to explain it well. If there's someone from Mexico here, they will know, as I do, that Mexican press is highly corrupt, and that has been happening for almost a century. The main press in Mexico, it's works for governments, work for big companies. So we knew that independent journalism, and one day we will jump to something else. And we were doing our job. I have been writing for 25 years, columns and stories and things. And I have been running in traditional media newspapers and sections about politics, and economy and human rights and everything. In the last 10, 12 years, we jumped to the abysm. we became independent, but something really changed 3 years ago, as I told you, because we jumped to video. Something changed into us internally, because one day, any day, I go out from my house and I see someone that say, "Hey, Alejandro, how are you?" And I have been anonymously all my life, writing a lot anonymously. And now video changed that for good, because our income has growth a lot, and that's because we dare to jump to something that we thought was very difficult and unknown, and well, this is the result.
Totally, and we'll talk more about the how in a bit. Jack, for you, why did you do this? Why did you decide that instead of pursuing a traditional path in journalism, that this was what you wanted to work to build?
So what I'm about to say is going to be almost the exact opposite of what Alejandro just said. I have no background formally in journalism. TLDR is the only thing I've really done in this realm. I didn't do a degree in politics. I didn't do a degree in journalism. I'm just kind of a normal person. But that being said, I have a real passion for politics. I always have done, and I've always wanted to give a voice to other young people. I started TLDR when I was 20 in my university bedroom, and I just wanted to have a platform that was for young people, by young people, that explained news in a way that was apolitical, approachable, and could kind of act as an on-ramp for them to news. I felt there was a real barrier for some young people with getting into news, that a lot of news publications expected a certain level of knowledge or expertise or experience that you just don't have because you weren't there for these things. So I wanted to create a platform that allowed you to do that and to kind of give people that power and give people that knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think YouTube was the obvious place to do it because there's no gatekeepers on YouTube. You can just upload. And obviously that's got a certain amount of accountability and responsibility that comes with that. But YouTube was able to allow me to start and get the ball rolling on my own without having to ask for permission or get any official approval.
Absolutely. The fact, like, the rigor and craft of journalism is the craft of curating real truth and real facts. And that is a challenge that we are going to get to. Cleo, I'm curious for you. I know that you covered similar things at Vox, kind of, but when you jumped into independence, you really came in with a very specific angle. Your show has a mission, it has a promise. I'm curious why you felt like it was the right thing to build from scratch, to start a channel that had zero and start building on your own.
Yeah, I covered technology for Vox for a while, and I had made videos like the coding episode on our Netflix show, which is called Explained, which is sort of a deep dive into computing. So I was very excited by the topic. I felt passionately that that was something that I wanted to cover. But I felt, even as a technology journalist, looking at the types of content that were available to me, the sort of meal before me, at least in my particular bubble, that there was a flavor missing. And that flavor was, how are we actually going to use these technologies, whether that be a particular clean energy source or quantum computing or new kinds of aviation or transportation? Who are the people that are working on those topics, and how are they going to use those technologies to actually make people's lives better? And that specific kind of optimistic technology journalism was something that I really wanted I just wanted to watch it and read it. And so when I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for and I couldn't find something to sort of believe in that way, I really wanted to make this specific show, which is called Huge If True. And so I felt very pulled to do this particular kind of thing, to offer this sort of creative flavor that I wanted to create. And the question of why do that independently as opposed to with a media company, I think gets at something that we're all answering with our content, which is, what would you make if you could make anything? What choices would you make? What people would you employ to make that work? How would it steer you in different ways than you're currently being steered, or naturally steering yourself because of the incentives that you're exposed to? I think we all have different answers to that question. And so Huge is really my particular answer to that. I wanted to make this kind of video with these people on this platform, but I think we all have different.
And that's one thing it struck me. I don't talk to a lot of independent journalists. Like, we're kind of all in our silo publishing things. So having this conversation, and when I do talk to different people doing this, you notice that, yeah, we're all on the same platform, but we all have very different motives. We all have very different business models. We have different scopes within our content and different motivations. I think for me, the thing that I noticed a few years ago as a consumer is that news always felt very impersonal to me. It always felt very kind of hard to connect with when it was just traditional reporting. And that doesn't mean I don't consume that, but I always felt a need for a connection with a more relatable voice, and someone that I could connect with. And I think that is kind of my own motivation for going independent, was like, I think that the future, especially in the advent of AI and synthetic or generative content, being able to connect with people with very little friction. You know, that my internet audience is me and my team and an audience, and we connect every week when we publish a video. And I speak to them in this very kind of relatable, almost unprofessional, informal way that wouldn't feel very appropriate at a journalistic institution. When I do work for the New York Times, or when I did work for Vox, like Vox, I think, has much more tolerance for this much more personal, relatable tone, but it still didn't make sense for it to be like, hey, I'm a curious person and I want to learn about the world, let me take you on that journey. And so I think that was my own personal motivation, but I'm just struck by how, from Alejandro as a traditional journalist who sees the future and wants to get with the times and has found an audience in that, to Cleo and Jack who saw a missing part of the market and went to fulfill it. Like, YouTube allows anyone to show up, and as long as they're selling something that an audience wants, there's a business model kind of built into it. So that's sort of where I want to go next here is, how do we do this? How do we make sure that if we're going to do journalism, which is a hard, difficult, laborious, expensive thing, that we can make money and pay our employees, but also report on truth and fact check and all of those things? So I'd love to get everyone's take on your process, how you're ensuring rigor, even when there are no gatekeepers, even when there isn't an institution. Alejandro, I'd be curious about your operation and how you make sure that things are rigorous.
Yeah, sure. We have today like 50 employees in our company in Sin Embargo. We used to have like 25 and then 30 people working on the company, but we expand our vision in the company, and the revenue and everything expand when we jump into video, into YouTube. That happened really, really fast. We didn't know how to do video, and actually we don't know how to do video at this point, because that's not our education. I was telling the guys that once I was talking to the columnist, all guys like him, and I was talking to the guys, telling them, let's make the people feel how you write the articles. Look to the camera and tell me how you write it, and make a small story saying, hey, my name is John Doe, and I'm writing, I just wrote this text, and I'm gonna read it to you with my voice, the way I just wrote it. And that changed everything. I was telling them that one of the guys suddenly became very famous. Very, very. He was anonymous. And he's like 62, 65 years old, and he became like a figure, you know, in the street.
For reading his article. He's reading
just
his
reading
column.
the article. And what he does is just this. He take the article and he said, hey, my name is Tal. I'm going to read my article, and thank you for watching here. Okay. And then he reads, but the sound of the voice and seeing the face gives you a different impression. You know that guy is telling you the truth. For instance, if you see the eyes of the people that is writing the articles, you know they are telling you the truth. So that changed everything in our business model.
To tell the audience how well that video did. A video like that, did it get 1,000 views? Did it get 10,000 views?
Million.
A million
Yes.
views.
Million views.
When Alejandro told me this, and I was like, so what? How many views did the original like text column get?
No, let me give you another example, because that will give you all the print media in Mexico prints in one day. All newspapers in Mexico print maybe 1 million copies. Maybe, I don't know, maybe less. But one video, 1 million persons sees one video of an old and wise columnist.
Yeah, that's such a powerful idea of meeting people where they're at with this content. You don't have a background in journalism. You made that very clear, and it sounds like, I'm sure that's an intimidating reality, and yet you you are running a journalism organization. I'm curious how you take precautions to make sure that it is actual journalism, which is the craft of presenting accurate truth and information.
Yeah, it's a difficult challenge. As you say, don't have the background in it, but it is what we're doing. We are journalists, we're making journalistic content, and the responsibility that comes with that and the accountability we have to our audience is a thing we take really seriously. We don't have any old people to read our articles, unfortunately. I think I'm basically the oldest person in the company. There might be a couple of people slightly older, but we are all young people who represent our audience and who like the content we make. We only hire from our audience because we want people who are passionate and enthusiastic about the mission that we have and the purpose that we have. So day to day, that means there's a lot of kind of holding each other to account. We have processes in place. We've worked to develop things to ensure that we have the rigor and that we have the kind of checks and balances internally, even with a small young team. And I think the fact that we all truly believe in what we're doing and we all want it to be as good as it can be is a great start. We also have a team of people that extends beyond the core 10 employees in London. We have a bunch of people around Europe and around the world who we touch in with fairly regularly. So if we're making a video on a specific country or a specific topic, we have people we can reach out to that are from academic institutions or students or experts that we regularly speak to and who can give us guidance. That was especially useful with the war in Ukraine, especially at the beginning of the conflict, being able to work with people in the country, even as a really small community. But I think that is the power of YouTube. I think the fact that we have kind of 2.2 million subscribers and we reach all these people, there's a whole bunch of young people and engaged people who want to be part of it. Yeah. We're not finding it difficult to find people to help us out and to give us advice because those people want to be part of the team. They also believe in the mission and they're willing to help us and give their guidance.
Totally. Cleo, I'm curious what your process is around doing journalism outside of the kind of standard model of facts and fact-checking and et cetera.
To be honest, it looks almost identical to what I was doing when I was making videos for Vox. I mean, we had a fact-finding process. It went on for several weeks. We had a production process. It involved editing, or it involved actually doing the interviews and fact-checking on background, all of that. Then we go through the editing process. Then we go through animation, post-production, all of that. That process as a production structure looks almost identical. Now we're adding in short-form production and experimenting with how we can improve it, and we're very flexible because we're independent. But I think this gets at an idea that sort of on this panel we're all examples of, which is everyone in this audience knows this already, but we forget it sometimes, which is that journalism isn't like having a medical degree or being a lawyer. It's not something that you get granted the ability to do by an institution. I'm not a journalist because I used to work for a media company. I'm a journalist because, and we're all journalists because, we follow a set of values and we follow a set of behaviors. And during the time that you follow those behaviors, you are a journalist. You weren't before, you aren't after, but you are during. And that's very, very important to realize. I think that people who see independent journalism as a threat to the journalistic institutions that we all know and love are sort of literally missing the forest for the trees in some way. It's like an oak tree that would see a sapling and say, that's a threat, as opposed to the continued growth of a forest. It's a beautiful thing to be able to have more voices and more opportunities to tell different kinds of stories, so long as we're all following the behaviors and the practices that merit the title of journalism.
Absolutely. I think for us, I hear a lot, people talk about like the internet and how it's this wild, sort of Wild West. Anyone can say whatever they want. The tools are so easy. There's very little friction. So how are we going to gatekeep or make sure that like truth and facts are being curated in these online? And certainly misinformation is a big problem. However, what I've learned is that the act of curating an audience who you have told, hey, I'm going to be a reporter. I'm going to give you truth, immediately creates an accountability. So for me, I do my best and have done my best from the beginning to be factually accurate. Last year, I made a couple of videos in a row where I got a little bit loosey-goosey on fact-checking. And in the sort of doom and gloom perspective, it's like, oh, whatever, no one's going to care because it's the internet and misinformation thrives on the internet. What actually happened is my audience dogpiled on me and said and called out the facts. And there's an upvoting system in the comments, and you start to see, if you put yourself out there as someone who says, I'm a journalist, your audience does hold you to account. Now, that's not the guardrails I think we should have, and so we, of course, took that as feedback and implemented a much more rigorous process with color coding and all these things with our scripts to make sure that it didn't happen. But the point is, I think it's important to note that, like Jack said, like there is a very engaged audience who wants good information, and when they sniff out bad information, if you've told them, hey, I'm someone who gives you good information, you will be called out. I know that for certain now, and I think that is one of the hidden benefits to having this sort of democratic back and forth online. I don't know.
Johnny, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I think that we are maybe in an audience of people who are sort of potentially interested in exploring, hey, what would independent journalism look like for me? And my question to you, as someone who went independent several years ago and has built just such a massive audience, and institution, people who like love your work in the audience, and also people inside your team that are able to be a part of what you do and actually sort of make so much more of it than you were able to make on your own. Or even, honestly, when you were working for a media company. I'm curious, what would the first, most practical thing that you would advise people to do if they've already sort of bought in, if they're already like, oh, that makes sense, I want to explore that. What's the first thing? And then I'd love to hear from the others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important point, is the practical tip here. For me, it's similar to what everyone said, is like find that missing gap in the market that you want as a consumer. I think for all of us have sort of made this very clear that like what you're allowed to do when you can do whatever you want should be what you want to watch or what you want to see or what you think is missing, because that's the thing that you are going to pour yourself into. So I think identifying that, not necessarily what should I do, but what do I really want to do that I think would resonate with a large number of people. And then I think the other thing would be to start to really question and think about what are the journalistic norms that I either learned in J school or in an institution that truly are necessary to make good factual information, and which are the ones that aren't. So for example, for me, my videos feature me as a host. I'm a host, I make jokes, I sometimes say bad words, and to me, none of those disqualify me from being able to be someone who's a curator of factual information, a storyteller of truth. And so to start to deconstruct some of those things, I think is a really vital sort of preamble to all of this. But then I think the third and most practical tip in all of this is learn the tools. There are so many tools available that are very low friction, very learnable tools, whether it's video editing or whether it is visual writing or whether it's animation. For me, it was animation. Learning animation opened me up to this whole world of, oh, I can explain anything because I can make magical things happen on a screen. Learning the skills, the hard skills associated with storytelling made me a better writer and eventually made me a better journalist and leader of the organization. But yeah, I would love to hear everyone else's take on this. What is the step one? What is the practical tool if someone wants to build a journalistic institution under their own voice? Alejandro, go ahead.
In my case is different from you guys in all senses, not because of my personal condition, but because of the country. Yeah. And when I see Alejandro when he was a boy and he was dreaming about freedom and doing journalism with freedom and things, I can applaud that Alejandro, because he didn't left the dream and he keep it. And it's marvelous that I'm a 55 years guy, that I'm changing to something else. And technology didn't become a barrier or something that will stop me. But no, at the end, I'm using technology as our business has done in all the history. The problem with the journalist is not technology. The problem with journalism is corruption in all the world. because of the companies wants to buy you, because the governments wants to buy you, they all want to buy you. So in the whole history of journalism, we have assumed technology, and we make the change, and that's not a problem. So for me, the big challenge was to find an audience that I can see in their eyes and talk to them with the truth, and I find it.
Yeah, amazing. Jack, go ahead.
I think I got to apologize for the cliche of the beginning of this answer, but I think the best thing to do is to start and to learn and to iterate, and kind of what you were saying with learning the tools. And there's certain parts which you can't just learn and iterate on the go. You've got to make sure your stories are good. You've got to make sure you've got the facts. All of that stuff has to be in place already. But making your videos look incredible, having great footage, having great animation, that's something you can learn while doing. You don't want to wait until you're making maps as good as Johnny's before you start. Otherwise, I would still have not started. So I think you've got to just get going, and you've got to start building that audience. If you look back at our first videos, I'd encourage you not to. But I'm not in them. I'm in all of our videos now. We have a style, we have a template. But at the beginning, it was all kind of full screen animation. But it was basically just a fancy PowerPoint with me voicing it over. And it wasn't for a couple of years. I think we had about 150,000 subscribers before I showed my face. Like, you don't have to go all in at the beginning. It can be a learning and iterative process in the open with the audience getting feedback. So I think just starting, really.
Into that. So important. Cleo, what about you? What's your tip?
So all of those, I think, are spot on. I think my first tip is don't go out and buy a camera. Like, a lot of people get so interested in the sort of technological aspect of making something look good that they forget that some of the people telling the stories that you want to watch the most, some of the most popular people on the platform that we are on making extremely high quality things are still recording on their iPhone. Like, yes, there are some things that matter. You should get a mic so that your audio doesn't make people upset. But the actual sort of technological whiz-bang of doing this job is not important. What is important is actually telling a good story and telling it in a way that you would want to watch. And that can mean looking really closely into the camera and describing something really interesting, or having the whole thing be shot from above while you point at a physical map that you got from the library, or whatever it is that is the way that you would actually explain this to a friend. You can do it, and you can make it in a video. I think the first very practical step that I took is while I was still working at a media company. This is actually the way that I became a producer at that same company, but it is also the beginning of my going independent story. I took night classes at the School of Visual Arts in New York to learn how to animate. And it unlocked a whole world for me. I mean, similar to you in animation, I was also learning editing at the same time, and that act of learning a new skill while I was still doing the job that I had 9 to 5 was allowed me to begin the path that has led me to where I am now, and hopefully will continue into the future.
I want to open it up to questions in a second. I think the last thing I want to say here is that we're sort of talking a lot about like going independent, starting on your own. I think a lot of these same concepts apply to institutions that want to adopt some of the ethos of what we do in terms of like a less, a more personal or more sort of internet vernacular. I don't think that just because, I don't think you have to jump ship from an institution to be able to emulate some of that and to connect with audiences. And I think Alejandro's the best example. Like, someone who read the tea leaves and said, like, this is the future, I want to connect with audiences. Oh, here's this platform that gives us a viable business model and allows us to reach 1 million people with someone reading a compelling article in a way that it could never have reached that many people before is also a really important component here. I'm seeing that happen with different institutions. Even at the New York Times, I'm a contributor at the New York Times a couple times a year, and they come in with a very high tolerance for, hey, you do you explore this, and they don't, you know, they help make it better. They help make it Timesian in their own way, but they're very lenient because they want to learn and they want to bring in new voices that have a little bit more of that sort of independent flavor to it. So I think that is a really important point here. With that, I would love to open it up to questions that folks have. So I think we have microphones. Do we have microphones? We do. So there's a question here in the front.
Is it on? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for the conversation. And you talked a lot about independent journalism. And I want to hear more from you about dependency and independency. Of course, all media are dependent in some way and form, and this conference is also sponsored by Google. But how do you feel about being dependent on this platform and also algorithms that very few people can actually see through? Absolutely. And another question, you talked about personal news, and you all show your face. How much are you dependent on your face for your company, and could you ever go away from that?
Absolutely.
Great questions.
Great questions. So your point about being dependent on the YouTube platform and a face or a personality, super relevant. That's absolutely right. I rent space on a Google technology platform. I rent space. I don't own that space. I don't own an audience or anything. Like I rent it. And so in that sense, there's absolutely a dependence. And that is also a major part of our revenue stream as well as the ad model that is baked into that. I think when I think of independence, I frame that against what might be called corporate media, or a media that is large to where it has to accommodate a lot of different verticals, a lot of different business streams, a lot of different publishing streams, and fitting into that meant that I needed to fit into the business priorities of a large umbrella that maybe was thinking about 10 different things that had nothing to do with what I wanted to make, as well as the revenue, the investors, the business that, as a creator within that organization, I wasn't clocked into. Now that gives you a lot of buffer and a lot of institutional support, but as someone who's independent, my only mandate is to connect with my audience, yes, on a rented platform, but I only have to think about that, and I think that is what independence means to me. There's just probably no such thing as fully independence anything. You're going to be dependent on something always, but that's sort of what it means for me. I'm curious what others think about what independence means for them and how they grapple with some of that. Anyone else have thoughts?
I totally agree with you. I mean, I see myself as a pilot. And I was driving a Chevy 1968 2 years ago. And I was happy driving it. And suddenly a Ferrari crossed in front of me. I'm a pilot. What I'm going to do is to jump in the Ferrari and run the Ferrari. So that's what I'm doing. I'm driving a Ferrari. But maybe, I don't know, maybe that Ferrari is going to close, or maybe that Ferrari for his own is going to crash in one street. But I'm a pilot. I'll be ready to jump into a bug. Do you remember these small bugs? Or a Ferrari. I'm ready.
That's a good way to put it.
I don't depend on technology. I depend on myself, and I appreciate, of course, the audience, always.
I think the audience is probably the most key thing, in my mind at least. I think maybe the key word from your question, for me at least, was the algorithm, and kind of the idea of the YouTube algorithm and like being dependent on that sounds kind of scary. But I think in reality, it still comes down to the audience. The algorithm is purely feeding itself off data and insights given by your audience. And the algorithm might change, the priorities might adjust, but it's not something I overly think about or worry about from my perspective, because as long as I keep performing for my audience and as long as I keep creating content people want, the algorithm I don't think is ever going to decide, hey, I don't like that guy, I'm going to punish him. The algorithm is just going to respond to what my audience does. And if I start making content that's bad, the algorithm might not be as kind to me, but that's about me and the relationship with the audience more than some kind of scary outside source.
Other questions? Go ahead. We have one here in the front. Okay.
Well, I have a very practical question. Let's say you want to start doing this. Let's say you want to maybe quit your job and start doing anything on YouTube, maybe. How do you make money? Where do you start? What do you have to do? On which doors do you have to knock to actually, well, pay for your own living?
Yeah, especially at the beginning. That is the big question. I know, I'll speak from an American perspective really quickly, which is in the US we have a lot of grants. There's a lot of grants of institutions that want to support good storytelling, want to support independent media. But you'll quickly learn that there is a creator economy that is just burgeoning right now under the nose of everyone in terms of media. Like, there is a giant world of sponsors who want to pay creators to shout them out in the middle of their video. And to be able to do that in a journalistically ethical way is very possible and very doable. And so getting savvy with the creator economy and the sponsorship network of people who are willing to pay for ads, I think is something that you should absolutely look into. And then pre-roll, you know, like monetization on your channel is something that with an audience can quickly happen.
I think that is one of the key things that YouTube provides, is the fact that you can be anybody and relatively quickly they start paying you. Other platforms, I mean, look at Twitter, who wants you to pay them to get an audience. YouTube is paying you for your creation, which makes sense. You're providing them with a thing, they're getting ad revenue from it, it's shared with you. And from my perspective, I started with no investment. We still have never had any money put in the company. I was a student, I didn't have any money to put into the company. And I still own it all, and it's still just cyclical and built off the money that the company has earned has been reinvested. So it's perfectly possible to do on your own. It is difficult at the start, and you've got to kind of optimize and work efficiently. But I think, as Johnny says, once you're able to start building scale, there is a whole ecosystem there.
Yeah, so fundamentally there are two business models. Either your audience can pay you or others can pay you for access to the audience that you built. Both are great. Both can be completely ethical, and there are also unethical ways of doing both that you want to avoid. In terms of asking your audience to pay you, that's about figuring out what is it, not just that they want, but that they would be willing to pay for. So is it a specific kind of insight that you offer them at a specific cadence that would make their lives better or their job easier, or that they're willing to pay for whatever, you know, amount that you're asking for. So that's a very specific product market fit analysis that you would probably do before you decide to go independent. And you would make that really clear. It would be like selling a specific thing. That thing is your writing or your videos. Some of those formats are a little bit trickier in video, but obviously there's sort of been this wonderful wave of journalists in text who have been doing that on various newspaper or newsletter models. The other option of having someone pay to have access to your audience can either be done through the AdSense that come in through YouTube. If you're publishing videos and you want to turn that on, you can do that. And to the point that others have made, once you build up even a fairly small amount of scale, if your production costs are pretty low, that can become break even pretty quickly and begin to pay you money, depending on how much your videos cost to make. But also, if you're looking for a sponsor to come into your content and be a part of what you're making, that can do very well. I mean, that is a business that is viable. That's what my business is based on. And the thing about that you need to decide if you're a journalist is, what is the product that you're selling to the advertiser? So I say, hey, you can be a part of this 60 seconds in the middle of my video, but it's going to be clearly marked as an ad, and you're going to be able to approve that ad read, but you're not going to know what's going to be in the rest of the video, because I don't want you to have editorial oversight into any of that. So that I sell this specific part, we can agree on that part, we make that part together, and then I have a rate that I sell that at. So it's just about figuring out, what does someone, whether it's an advertiser or your audience, want, and what are you comfortable with selling so that you can offer that to them in a way that makes sense and sort of says like, oh, I can clearly see the product, I'm going to buy it from you.
Yeah. I think we're out of time. Thank you so much, everybody.